Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. Now, not to toot my own horn or anything, but red dragons really are the best villains for a D&D game. Nothing embodies the chaotic evil energy like a—
Drake, stop what you're doing. We got a problem.
I'm sorry, a party of what is at the front gate?
It's an all-dwarf party.
All right, lads. What do we want? Beer! No, you idiots. We want to kill the dragon and steal his treasure. Oh. And beer. Yeah!
Are we still allowed to call them dwarves? I thought Peter Dinklage got all pissy.
You're really gonna want to take this seriously. This is like the worst-case scenario for any big bad evil guy.
Oh, come on. I'm a 1,500-pound living flamethrower with a pimped-out fortress. Why would I be afraid of Grumpy, Dopey, and Doc out there?
Wow, you really don't get it, do ya? It's an all-dwarf party. No human journeys of self-actualization, no tiefling emo trash, no feminine elf preening. That is a trio of sleep-deprived alcoholics who run on testosterone and spite. They are here to get shit done, and nothing's gonna stop them from kicking in our door to steal our stuff and shanking you in the kidney.
Relax. The Den of the Drake is protected by the sponsor of this week's video, Aura. Aura plunges the depths of the dark web and sends me real-time alerts if they find my phone number, email, or social security number floating around. Bank of America recently announced that it had a massive data breach and didn't tell anyone for months. And it's not even the first data breach they've had this year. On average, it takes a company a whole 277 days to report a breach. So your personal data could have been exposed months ago and you'd only be hearing about it now. I'm not dumb enough to give a criminal a 9-month head start. So, Larry, that's why I got the whole place all aura'd up.
Drake, that's not gonna...
Come and get me, you pint-sized prick.
All right, lads. You heard him.
Huh, that should have worked.
Maybe because they're dwarves and not...
It's time to unveil phase 2 of my master defensive strategy. See, Larry, Bank of America wasn't the only bank to get caught with their pants down. Both Citigroup and JP Morgan Chase announced data breaches last year, too. There are so many data breaches these days that your social security number may as well be written on a bathroom stall. But I'm not worried because Aura has multi-tiered protection. Aura will not only alert me if someone is selling my personal data, but also if someone tries to use it to access my credit card or bank accounts. Plus, they provide $5 million in identity theft insurance in case the worst-case scenario happens, which I spent on this. Time to release the Auragators.
Why did you paint them blue?
Coating animals in spray paint is one of the world's most treasured art forms, Larry. Read a book sometime, huh?
It wouldn't happen to be that lead-based paint you ordered the other day, right?
Damn it, those bastards are craftier than I thought.
I'm telling you, Drake, Aura's not gonna...
Time to break out the final phase. Oh, they're gonna learn today that Aura's more than just a tool for sniffing out weirdos selling your data. It has an antivirus software, VPN, password manager, parental control hub, data broker opt-out tools, and tons of other stuff, all accessible from one convenient app. Using all these powers combined, I've devised a security measure so devious, so unflinchingly clever and ruthlessly efficient that there's no way they could possibly...
They got past it.
God damn it! There's that dragon.
Dude, how? Aura is the most reliable yet affordable cybersecurity hub on the market. How did you get here so fast?
That's what I've been trying to tell you, numbnuts. Aura's great at protecting you from cybersecurity threats, but there's nothing cyber about an all-dwarf party.
Well, you could have told me that when I was spray painting the alligators.
Enough of this. Surrender the goods or face the consequences.
Hell no, you'll never take any of my internet cringe.
What? Internet cringe?
Why the hell would we want that? We're here for the
or a link.
Aye, we dwarves know a treasure when we see one. The best that the other companies can do is give us some free credit monitoring. But Aura can stop that crap before it even happens.
No! Clicking my link or going to aura.com/Den of the Drake will give you a 14-day free trial of Aura. That's plenty of time for Aura to find and react if any of your personal data was exposed, while also directly supporting my channel. You bastards! Give us the free trial, Dragon, or we're going to get stabby.
Oi, oi, lads, no need for that. I snuck in and grabbed the free trial while you were mucking about. He was hiding it in his description. Cybersecurity is ours.
Wait, we can't just leave without stabbing something. That's not very dwarfy.
Ow! Oh God, he got my kidney. That good enough for you, lads?
Yes, congratulations, lads, on a quest well done. Let's go enjoy our free trial. Well, don't you feel dumb for worrying about an all-dwarf party? There was a hobbit with them the whole time. So, need a ride to the hospital?
No, I think I'd rather bleed out here, thanks.
I'm not leaving myself or my loved ones vulnerable to data breaches anymore, which is why I let Aura do all the hard work for me. Click the link in my description or go to aura.com/Den of the Drake to get 14 days of Aura protection for free. That's plenty of time for Aura to do its work and catch any weirdos using your personal information in ways you wouldn't want them to. Plus, it's a great way to support my channel, so if you like what I do, you can go ahead and thank Aura for their continued support. Link is in the description. All dwarf party. Still better than elves, those fragile, self-righteous little pricks. Well, while Larry's getting that stab wound all sutured up, I think we should read a saga. Don't worry, it's appropriately themed so he doesn't feel left out. So in our little RPG horror story bubble, we encounter many different kinds of villains, ranging from the annoying to the downright parasitic. But very rarely does one of these skid marks on the underwear of society actually evolve from an annoyance into an actual threat. But if my mom taught me anything, is that with enough grip strength and determination, anyone can gift anyone with a good shanking. Follow your dreams, kids. Full transparency, my mom is serving 2 life sentences and her son did grow up to be an influencer, so yeah, probably best not to take any advice from that woman. The saga I have for you today stars a player whose subtle hesitation towards a new player they introduce to the game gets more and more validated with every passing session. Because it turns out that overly dramatic emotional outbursts can only go on for so long until something's gotta break. And in this case, the thing that breaks may or may not be OP's skin under the caress of a sharp object. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG-Horror-Stories. Enjoy. This week's saga comes from Reddit user PsychoJack and is titled, "Our Rogue Tried to Stab Me IRL." So I've been doing D&D on and off since high school. Our DM in this story has been doing it since grade school, if you can believe it. In 2018, he just moved from the other side of the state and was looking for people to play D&D with, and asked me if I knew any people who'd want to play. He was even willing to be the DM. Full disclaimer, his DMing is amazing, but I made the unfortunate mistake of bringing in one of those new D&D players. To clarify, I'm not against new people learning D&D. It's a great game to play with the right people, but this was not one of them. So a quick rundown of the party. We had Asher playing a human fighter, one of the new ones that I had brought in. Myself playing Minwaro, a human samurai. Duma, the DM's girlfriend, playing a Tibet Zionist, and Rowan, an elvish rogue, the other one I brought in and the subject of this tale. And of course, we have our DM. I'm not going to use his real name, but we'll call him Dan. We had a surprisingly quick session 0, as most of the character backstories and class discussions were talked about through Facebook Messenger. So when we met up face to face, it was just a matter of rolling dice and choosing equipment. And since we got it done so quick, the DM decided to do a quick one-shot session using the same characters and setting. Just cause Asher and Rowan hadn't played D&D at all before and wanted to give them an idea of what they were in for. We were playing version 3.5 on a campaign of his own creation called Vol. This was the first sign that things were going to be problematic with Rowan. We were starting out as a group of mercenaries escorting a caravan. We all had some fun interactions with each other between Minwaro, Asher, and Duma. Rowan didn't say anything to anyone, which I didn't think anything of. Baby's first rogue is Edgy, I know how it goes. We reached our destination, some ruins out in the woods somewhere, and we're told to scout out the area. While exploring, we could see someone in the clearing. Duma was our squishiest party member, so we told her to stay hidden and wait for one of us to give the signal. Asher and I took point, and Rowan hid in the trees. Upon us getting closer, we discovered it was a dwarf. I don't remember the name, so I'm just gonna call him Dwarf. Dwarf, hello there. Are you two exploring the ruins as well? Asher, who are you? Dwarf. Oh, I apologize. I'm part of the DMI excavation team. Note, the DMI is one of the two warring factions that serves as one of the overarching conflicts in the world of Volt, the other being the Green Tide, with the latter consisting of mostly orcs, goblins, your typical Mordorian bad guy roster. Point of that flavor text is that the dwarf didn't appear hostile with us. I think he was in process of asking if he could accompany us, but that's when Rowan pipes up and says,
I throw a dagger at his throat.
Asher and Minwaro out of character. What? Why? Rowan was already in the process of rolling. Much to our horror, she rolled a natural 20. She then asked if she can roll a stealth check so that she isn't seen. Dan says normally that'd have to be something she'd have to call before she rolled for her shot. But since she got a nat 20, he allowed it. Unfortunately, this time she got the opposite luck. Not a nat 1, but even with her bonuses, it was not enough to get past either mine or Asher's notice checks. We both knew it was from her, and naturally we confronted her about it. Minwara, what did you do that for? He wasn't hostile. Asher, he said he was with a group. There's likely going to be others looking for him. Rowan,
It doesn't matter. I'll take care of them too if they get in the way of my mission.
Before either of us had a chance to say anything else, Rowan decides that she's going to run off ahead further into the forest ruins. We both want to chase her, but also didn't want to leave Duma behind, so we lag back so we can all travel as a group. So while we're traveling, Rowan's making her way further into the temple. Meanwhile, we run across the rest of the dwarf's team, who's understandably a bit more hostile than he is, considering they probably just found their friend's mutilated corpse before meeting us, and were ready to point crossbows at the first suspicious faces they could find. For some context, Duma was something of a wild card in our party, whereas Minwara was more of a go-with-the-flow kind of guy. Duma.
I can mind thrust them and take care of them quickly.
Minwara. Wait, hold on. We don't need to spill any more blood. Asher. Well, what do you have in mind? Minwara. Follow my lead. Minwaro approaches them and in a formal tone says, "Excuse us. We're looking for our prisoner. Have you seen an elvish woman?" Rowan, out of character.
What?
Long story short, to save both of us from having a fight and Rowan from getting on the DMI list less than an hour into the campaign, I bluffed them into thinking I was a prison warden trying to find our escaped convict, who'd escaped into the ruins while in transit. Rowan kept glaring daggers at me whenever I talked from that point on. I should note at this point that Rowan had not bothered coming out of the mines. She had also not bothered checking for traps at any point. Thankfully, she'd also been lucky enough to avoid any tiles that had traps on them. But by the time our joint party with the DMI entered the mines, we were already too late. She had activated a trap. He didn't do this a lot, but every once in a while, Dan would actually roll to see what kind of trap went off, unless it was an established part of the dungeon. But he rolled a d4 and we could all hear him mutter,
Oh,
Turns out she had got the bad ending of this trap scenario. If it was a 1, it would have been a trap malfunction and nothing was gonna happen. If it was a 2 to 3, it was gonna be an arrow trap, think Indiana Jones. But 4 was a blunderbuss trap. She says,
Wait, I am a rogue. I should have been able to see that coming.
Dan said that she can only do that if she was declaring that she was checking for traps. She claimed she didn't know that she had to call it. Dan shrugged and said, all right, since she's new and didn't know. But she rolled and failed. She asked if she can add anything to it. Dan asked if she put any points into detecting trap and asked to see her character sheet. As a rogue, she did have the ability to detect traps inherently, but she hadn't put any skills into it. So cut back to our parties, and we follow the loud boom to a horrifically injured and incapacitated elvish rogue. A few more rolls, I managed to persuade them to patch her up and restrain her rather than just kill her. Out of character, Rowan kept passive-aggressively snipping at us for not attacking them and helping her. We had 2 lawful goods in the party and 1 neutral good, none of which were exactly open to violence, especially when they hadn't attempted to make an attack on either her or the party. We went back and searched the place after we brought her back to the caravan. I volunteered to stay with one of the DMI to watch her do what they did, and they came back after getting what they needed. And that was Session 0. We told her that pretty much everything that happened would not be counted against us later, but just to keep the murder hoboing down for when we do the actual game. She still seemed pretty snippy during the end of that session because we had to treat her as a prisoner, but we kept telling her that this wasn't against her, it was to keep us all from getting into an unnecessary fight. Ah, so she's a murder hobo. I wonder if that'll manifest itself in a negative way in future developments of this story. The attempt at murder part, not the hobo one. But I don't know, in this economy, the hobo life might become pretty appealing for some people. I don't know if I've ever discussed murder hobos and how to deal with them in a meaningful way, so I'm gonna take this opportunity to do so. I assume that we all know what a murder hobo is at this point, right? It's a player who gets way too stab happy to the point that the game becomes completely derailed because of the surplus of bodies lining every path that the party travels. In my experience, there are two different kinds of murder hobos, which I have affectionately named the Hannibals and the Jokers. The Hannibals are more devious, and will often kill NPCs under the guise of,
"It's what my character would do."
These characters tend to be evil or neutral aligned, and often lean into the edgelord crap so much that a Hannibal might end up resembling Cold Steel the Hedgehog more than Hannibal Lecter himself. Hannibals are double-edged swords because they are more thoughtful in their disruptive behavior, which means they can be reined in easier, but that also means that their disruptive behavior might have more purposeful intention, which is a huge red flag considering how they knowingly made a character they knew might negatively impact the experiences of their tablemates and just didn't care. The Joker is the opposite of the Hannibal, since they're all about the chaos. When a Joker pops a cap in a shopkeep, it's not to shock the other players or show how edgy their character is. It's from the simple desire to sow chaos and act on their impulses. Does that NPC have a dope sword? Now the Joker has a dope sword. Are the blacksmith's prices too high? Well, everything is free 99 now because the blacksmith doesn't have a head anymore. Would burning down that orphanage be funny for even a fleeting moment? Who left all these rags and glass bottles filled with gasoline lying around? You get the idea. It's pretty rare for Jokers to be veteran players. Often a Joker will be a new player who got way too hung up on the whole "it's like a video game, but you can do whatever you want" pitch that they were given when they were first introduced to the game. Jokers are way more disruptive than Hannibals because their shenanigans tend to make the game damn near unplayable. But their affliction is much more easily curable and preventable, because they'll often grow out of it as they keep playing, or drop it immediately after they get their first talking to. Both of these kinds of murder hobos are going to be more receptive to different approaches, but both are highly receptive to, wait for it, a good Session 0. Side tangent, but it's come to my attention that after I made the video about how awful I think safety tools are, some people, well, specifically Redditors, so that people label is debatable, thought they had this big gotcha moment over me and my community by pointing out how most of the comment section agreed that Session 0 was the only, quote, safety tool worth a damn.
See, they talk smack on safety tools, but they're using safety tools themselves. Oh, they're just so close to understanding how stupid they are.
Wow, you sure owned us with your facts and logic. It's almost like retroactively labeling every minuscule act of human decency as a safety tool is a sad attempt at making insane ideas like encouraging adults to abandon open and honest communication in favor of games of red light, green light seem less absurd to anyone whose development advanced past the age of 12. You can kindly f*** off back to Weenie Hut Jr. with your bull because we're salty as hell in this spittoon. Anywho, sorry for swerving this train off the tracks. I understand that it's par for the course when you're dealing with people championing ideas that can't stand on their own, but that specific example of moving goalposts irritated me probably more than it should've. Maybe because it was an attack on my community instead of me specifically, and that shit is whack. Those people pay my bills. On the bright side though, that video got a tsunami of support from the wider community, so we can all rest easy knowing that most of the TTRPG space hasn't gone totally insane. Anyways, the idea of what a Session 0 should be is nebulous at best, so much so that I may end up making a dedicated video on how to run one. But in my world, a Session 0 isn't really a session at all. It's a dedicated time to sit down and establish expectations for the game and the characters that everyone will be playing, as well as setting clear and defined boundaries on what sort of behavior will and will not fly in the game itself. If you run it properly and are playing with the right people, then most of the problems you would have experienced will evaporate into thin air long before they can manifest. That being said, I don't think that Rowan was given a proper session 0 here. The problem with running a session 0 as an actual game session is that you get distracted from the priorities of a session 0 by the fun that you're having just playing D&D. Any sort of curb your bullshit type messaging is cast aside, because half of the fun of D&D is just being on your bullshit. And apparently Rowan's bullshit includes literal assault, so why don't we dive back in and see how that plays out. Part 2 is titled Our Rogue Tried to Stab Me IRL. Part 2, Samurai Pimp to the Rescue. Now, before I jump into Part 2, there's some clarifications I need to add before continuing this story. 1. I had showed this first part to Dan when I had posted it to get some better recollection on certain details, and he pointed out that Vol was actually his own original creation based only off of the 3.5 setting. I didn't know that initially, so I apologize if anyone wanted to look into it, so I edited it to where it felt less like, oh yeah, everyone should know this one. But it's a masterful creation despite the things I'm going to be talking about later on. 2. I should have also clarified that Minwano was the character I play when I said myself, Minwano, in case that wasn't made clear. 3. I'd forgotten that Rowan actually played 2 characters. While both technically they have different names, I'll be referring to both as Rowan for the sake of keeping track of who is who. That, and there wasn't much of a difference between the characters besides the name. With that said, this next story will document the death of that first character. So our first actual session was good. We had our characters start off as a bunch of people randomly assigned together to fight as a group in a Coliseum tournament, which we had won. We had thematically similar but otherwise different backgrounds. Asher wanted revenge on a sorcerer who used magic to force him to kill his own wife and daughter. Duma was an escaped test subject / slave. Rowan was a vagabond elf, which is a slave race in the Vol universe. And Minwano lost his family, but got his revenge, so now he's sort of trying to mentally cleanse himself. So we all ended up coming to a consensus of, hey, want to head over to the next town and liberate some slaves? We moved over to the next town that we kinda made our hub world to come back to when we weren't dungeon running. Most sessions after were not quite as constructive. So next session we get into town, and both Rowan and Duma make rolls to see if they can find some kind of information. Duma fails a roll, but Rowan actually gets a nat 20 in her info grab. So she gets approached by a hooded elf. She gives her a solid tip about a baker who's using a large building that he fronts as a bakery, but is actually a big human trafficker. And she gives her a poison to kill him with that can be easily slipped into food. So Rowan regroups with the rest of the party and tells everyone what she knows. We came up with a plan that rather than just kill him outright, we were going to slip the poison into his food so it would make people sick, and he would slowly lose business. It made sense at the time. Not be able to afford the building and lose his front before taking him out. But here's the key detail. We wanted to do this at dawn. Rowan wanted to do it at midnight. We argued about it for a while until she started getting noticeably heated about it out of character and finally agreed. So we find an inn to stay at for the night, and naturally she goes along with it. She waits with us, and then I'm just kidding, she sneaks out of the inn at the dead of night, makes her way over to the baker, and disguises her elvish nature because, as a reminder, elves are either a slave race or treated as second-class citizens in this universe. The rest of us kept warning her, dude, if you're gonna do this, at least wake somebody up. If you get caught, none of us are gonna be able to help you. Even Dan was kinda urging her at that point, but she insisted. So he rolled with it. Dan's usually one of those DMs who's willing to let you do a lot of dumb shit so long as you're willing to live with the potential consequences if things go wrong. One time he let one of us try to intimidate the ground to soften the landing after falling at a terminal speed at the cost of if it failed, the character would die. I'll let the reader guess which way that went. Point is, if he's urging it, then that's not a good sign. But regardless, she went in, disguised, and went in to seduce the baker. To her credit, she did succeed in poisoning the bread. And we were all, great, now all you gotta do is find an excuse to escape and get out. But she said,
No, I want to keep fucking with him.
Turns out she meant both literally and figuratively, because she manages to get him all the way to the bedroom and start boinking him. We were all looking pretty uncomfortable. We expected some I seduced the dragon related antics at some point, don't get me wrong, but we weren't expecting it at a point where the stakes were so high and the risks were high. So, naturally, she couldn't expose any part of her, but she had a headdress on to cover her elvish appearance. But when you're having a guy boink you, you can't expect it to stay on unless you're actively concentrating on that. So Dan has her make a disguise check to make sure that it actually stays on. Ladies and gentlemen, the Nat 1 cometh. So to give you a more solid understanding, if you're an elf trafficker, you're probably not gonna want to find out you're having sex with an elf. And Rowan rolled a Nat 1. The mood was suddenly killed, and he ends up throwing her off him. He then proceeds to try and kill her. She initially tries to fight back, but realizes that she's a naked, dainty elf woman armed with nothing but her headdress, and the baker is built like a tank. So she decides to do a rogue's equivalent to a walk of shame and jump out the open window. No gear, no armor, no clothes, and even worse, Nat 1 strikes again, and she fails her reflex check, so she isn't able to land so much as splat. The fall damage knocks her out, and it cuts back to us. By this point, Rowan was looking at us all accusingly, saying,
Why aren't you guys helping me?
I just had my face buried in one of my hands and said, I told you we were asleep. You didn't even wake any of us up before you left. You didn't even leave a note. That didn't stop her from glaring daggers at us, but I digress. So we get up and we start looking around town wondering where the F our rogue went. Duma gets her role redemption and manages to find info about a naked unconscious elf woman found outside the bakery late last night. In character, everyone had somewhat put 2 and 2 together and let out a collective, oh shit. We were metagaming a little bit trying to coordinate on how we wanted to do this. Asher. It might not be a good idea to do the prison warden bit. If he lives around town, he'd probably recognize when a guard doesn't look familiar. Not to mention you are dressed like a traditional samurai, not a town guard. Minwara. I think I have an idea. So we knock on the door and one of his assistants opens up. Baker assistant. Yes? Can I help you? In a sultry voice I said, What's good, baby? I'm here on behalf of my girls at the brothel. We sent someone in to show you a good time, but she didn't come back last night. Rowan, out of character.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Long story short, I managed to once again bluff my way in by pretending to be a samurai pimp. I don't know how it worked, but I rolled high enough so I just took it and ran with it. The baker's assistant kept insisting that no one was here last night, believing it to be the truth since he wasn't there. Now, in character, we thought he was the baker. Eventually, Asher got tired of what was happening and insisted that he knew that he was lying and tried to intimidate him into talking, which thankfully worked because at some point we heard him say, I don't know, I swear. Does it have to do with that room in the back that my boss won't let me into? That is a yupperoni with a side of fries there, my guy. We got what we were looking for, so he led us to the back, leading into a small dungeon. I should note now that this next part was even conceded by Dan to be a bit more on the dark side, so this is not for the faint-hearted. So I should note at this point, Dan was having Rowan make fortitude saves, and her odds were not looking good. As we start going down, we spot the baker who tried to attack one of us, but Asher managed to tackle him, making short work out of him. But when we got down, we saw dozens of elves who were noticeably beaten, mangled, chained to posts, and looking like they had been through every kind of abuse you could imagine. They looked absolutely horrified when we showed up. After explaining who we were, we grabbed a few blankets and rags to help cover them and told them to wait by the stairs. We looked for Rowan, and after a quick search, we found her. Much like the other elves, she was chained up, and we discovered that she had failed her death saves. She was dead. After we evacuated the elves to the Temple of Ilmater, the clergy temple, we ended the session there. After the session, Rowan got noticeably angry, saying that Dan was targeting her. We kept reminding her that she had split from the party on multiple occasions to go do dangerous and risky things, most of which were without even telling the party, and it came back to bite her. That being said, we did also acknowledge that the way she went was a bit on the darker side, so Dan did offer to work with her to help make a new character that's more tailored to how she wants to play, since she didn't 100% fit the part of Rogue when she did play. But that part we'll save for the finale of this story, along with the promised stabbing. I promise, guys, you just gotta wait for one more post. It's coming. Jesus, I mean, I hate elves as much as a decent person should, which is a lot, but damn, dude, you didn't have to go and try and validate the safety tools, people. And before anyone decides to go and be a wise ass, no, I don't think safety tools would have been a positive influence here. Because we know Rowan would be abusing that shit like Lizzo abuses backup dancers, and no story benefits from having an entire HR department stapled to its ass. That's how we all got forced into saying cartoonish shit like sewer slide and unalived when discussing serious subjects. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and assume that y'all had a discussion of expectations and boundaries before starting this campaign like adults are supposed to do, and that every one of your players knew exactly what kind of dark themes they were signing up for when they signed on. If they didn't, and you drop that whole thing in their laps unannounced, then there are two horror stories going on here, and one of them is significantly more egregious than the one that's supposed to be the actual horror story. I'm a bit of a free speech absolutist, so that bleeds into my belief that no subject should be banned from RPGs as a whole. That being said, some subjects absolutely should be treated with care to avoid things becoming, uncomfortable for everyone involved. And this kind of thing is definitely one of those subjects. But even if we assume that everyone knew what they were getting into, I'd probably still be on Rowan's side here. If I were in her position, I would be pissed. There are zero, count 'em, zero scenarios I can think of where my character dying off screen would make me think anything other than, well, I guess I'll go f myself. Was Rowan asking for consequences? Absolutely. Was Rowan being obnoxious by purposefully going against pre-established party plans? Absolutely. Did Rowan deserve to be taught a lesson? Maybe, but not like this. This feels like giving someone the death penalty for jaywalking. This is maybe how you kill an NPC, but definitely not a player character. If I were Rowan, I would be more satisfied with the baker just putting a crossbow bolt between my eyes or breaking my neck on impact with a cobblestone. Because at least I could pretend like it was some kind of narrative event that I had some sort of control over. Having the baker capture her alive and sending the party to her exact location is like putting up a glowing neon sign that reads, "This is a rescue mission." Which, come on, it's very clearly gonna be giving Rowan hope that her character is gonna be getting out of there. And frankly, having her be rescued when she was only an inch away from death would be an excellent way to teach her about the consequences of her actions while reinforcing the idea of teamwork with the rest of the party. But Dan basically said, "Oh yeah, your character died off screen, and the party was trying to rescue a corpse the whole time. Also, they died in one of the most horrific ways possible. Lamau, get I don't really know what to call that other than a dick move, and I don't know about you, but I'd probably start feeling kind of stabby myself." Our third and final part is titled, "Our Rogue Tried to Stab Me IRL. Finale." So I completely neglected to mention this in the last two parts, but while all this was going on, Asher and Rowan were a couple, which is why we had brought them both in together. And over the sessions, we could definitely notice a deterioration in their relationship. Now, whether one was the cause of the other is anyone's guess, but given how these next few sessions play out, it definitely wouldn't surprise me. So this is going to be the last entry, which means you'll finally get to hear about the infamous stabbing. That said, this last part was over the course of multiple sessions, so if it drags out in certain places, that's why. I'll do my best to abridge where it's needed. So come the start of the new session after Rowan's character dies, Dan agreed to help Rowan with creating a new character. As previously mentioned, it was under a different name, but to avoid confusion, I'm just gonna call her Rowan because, like I said before, there wasn't much of a difference between the two. It's worth noting that before this session, he had mentioned in the group chat for Rowan to have at least some idea of what she wanted to play, and of course, she did not. So ultimately, the character he helped her create was called a Duskblade, which for those not aware, like I wasn't at the time, is just a fancy word for spell-casting sword fighter. Which means we had to introduce Rowan to the concept of spell lists and spell preparation. What we were hoping to just be a couple of minutes of rolling dice and choosing equipment like how it was last time turned into 2 hours of wishy-washy Build-A-Bitch. But it was a weekend for all of us, so we didn't mind as much. Though now that all was said and done, we agree that the whole thing was dumb. Not only did she take long deciding spells, but she also took forever deciding the race she wanted to play. It brought the campaign, which should have been well on its way, to a screeching halt. Alright, so actual session starts now. So after the whole incident with the baker, we realized that we needed better equipment if this was just one of the slavers around the world. So we decided to take a contract with the local guild. We got a mission that said there was this temple artifact that was making all the animals go wild in the woods. So they were sending us to go into this temple and bring it back to them. They warned us that it was dangerous. So they gave us the contract and an additional person to join us, our way of introducing Rowan back to the party, and even gave us the option to get 3 additional NPCs. Asher ended up recruiting a cleric, Rowan recruited a monk, and Duma recruited a Warforged paladin that had a serialized name, but we just called him Vinny. Now you're probably wondering, what about the other 2 NPCs? Why don't they have names? We'll get to that. So as we started getting deeper into the woods closer to the temple, we started finding these gigantic spider webs. We didn't find any spiders, but at this point Rowan decides she wants to test out one of her abilities. So as we're walking away from the webs, we hear her say,
I cast the burning hands on the web.
Duma, what? Why? Rowan,
Do you see these giant spider webs?
Minwano, do you see any giant spiders? Rowan,
No, but I know they're here. I can tell. What do I roll to tell?
Dan, do you have any knowledge in nature? Rowan,
Knowledge, nature.
Dan, do you at least have notice? Rowan,
No.
I should note that this talk did not talk her out of burning handsing the place. And as it happened, the way the wind was blowing caused the fire to burn extensively to the north, creating a much bigger fire, and not really killing any spiders that we could see. This action would come back to haunt us later in the story, but for now, we'll focus on us getting inside. So we end up getting inside and find out this place had quite a bit of treasure rather than just the relic that they were asking for us to pick up. But there was also another thing inside that made it a little difficult. Spiders. Big ones, ranging from the size of a Labrador to the size of small bears. And the one who was the boss monster was a spider the size of a school bus. Not only was it big, it was intelligent too, and could talk. And it was not happy with us being here. Wait, what? Okay, so there were spiders. Come on, man, you don't need the cognitive powers of Professor X to notice spider webs spun by a spider the size of a bus. And you sure as don't need to be the fantasy version of Steve Irwin to know that where there are giant spider webs, there are giant spiders. I know that blurb was written to make Rowan look dumb, but between that, the events of the previous part, and the fact that the DM just arbitrarily decides that the wind just so happens to be blowing in a direction with enough force to make Rowan's first level spell turn into a raging inferno, it only really serves to make Rowan's accusations of targeting seem less absurd. Now, I'm not saying she's justified in her actions or even likable in the slightest, but there's been enough questionable decisions going on here that I'm going to be reading with a bit closer scrutiny. The monk NPC suddenly sensed a gaseous smell in the air, and the place was surrounded by webs. But Rowan was looking to set up another fire trap for the spiders, not realizing how deadly the spell would be to literally everyone. Rowan decides to check herself and fails her notice check, after quickly writing that she had it on her character sheet, I should add. And of course, the whole temple is suddenly up in flames. So we have this big boss fight with a gargantuan spider and her children, and we start rolling for initiative. Rowan and her monk NPC actually get first on the initiative, but rather than jump into the fight, Rowan suddenly notices the giant pile of treasure in the temple, and thus her heart was full of avarice, not even noticing the relic we're supposed to be getting being there. So he tells the monk to come with her and start looting some of the treasure. Monk, dude, we're being attacked. I don't want to do this right now. Rowan,
Too bad. I hired you. You have to follow your contract.
Monk, there are giant spiders attacking us and your comrades. Rowan,
Ah, that's not your problem.
at this point, I was starting to get irritated too, but I couldn't really do much because of the aforementioned giant spider that was ready to make us into mincemeat. At some point, she even started metagaming, saying that he's lawful good and he's supposed to follow it. I mentioned that's not really how alignment works, and our DM had to mention a few times with her not to metagame. Vinny, thankfully, was our MVP for that fight, and managed to almost solo this giant spider himself, or at the very least keep its attention off us for a while. The same could not be said, however, for her children, and unfortunately one of them had its eyes set on the poor monk. It bit him, and he ended up failing his fortitude save, having him take poison damage. Top of the next round, and he's trying to urge Rowan,
Please, help me. I don't think I can move with this spider's venom.
The rest of us managed to get rid of some of the smaller spiders, and I noticed the monk, who was quite a bit away from the fleeing Rowan when Dan suddenly asked us all to make fortitude saves to stop us from passing out from the smoke. The monk failed, though he lost consciousness that turn too. Duma failed hers, and Rowan, in a moment of karma, also failed hers. So now it was just an issue of getting out of the burning temple without getting eaten by the giant spider. But Vinny, who despite losing an arm at this point, was still pulling some T-800 level acts of heroism keeping this thing busy. He holds one of the falling gates open long enough for us not only to get through, but to drag our unconscious ones through with us, and says, I promised I would make sure no harm comes to you. I intend to keep it that way. He became a personal favorite of both mine and Duma's in later sessions, and you could see why. Asher grabbed Rowan, I had grabbed Duma, and Asher's cleric had grabbed Rowan's monk. So we make a sprint at full speed out of the burning temple and pretty much collapse from exhaustion. We think we're out of the woods, metaphorically, when suddenly the giant spider surfaces out from under the temple. All of us, the ones who are conscious anyway, have this mixed look of terror and exhaustion before the spider ends up falling dead. Out from under it, the monoplegic warforged Vinny comes hobbling out from under its carcass and says, Mission complete. I must conserve power now, and proceeded to pass out with everyone else. Later, the others regained consciousness. The monk was still badly hurt, but the cleric helped him get stable so we wouldn't have to worry about losing him in his sleep. Minwano confronted Rowan at first by asking if she was alright. Rowan,
Yeah, I'm fine.
Minwano, good. Then I won't feel bad about doing this. I then proceeded to swing at her with the blunt end of my sword. Rowan,
What was that for?
Minwano points to the pile of loot. For that, your avarice almost cost us 3 lives today, including your own. Like clockwork, Rowan starts glaring at me and says,
You're seriously attacking me?
I was, for the record. I rolled my attack and everything. All I asked was, what's your AC? Lower than the hit, so she got a nice dose of non-lethal damage. She started getting angry with me, accusing me of singling her character out. Then I said, just because your character is chaotic neutral doesn't mean you can just do whatever you want with it and not expect consequences.
Firstly, don't tell me how to play my character. I know my character better than you. Secondly, she's not chaotic neutral, she's chaotic good.
On that note, Duma, the player, who's normally not confrontational, ends up intervening herself, saying,
Okay, no, that is not a chaotic good action you pulled. Minwano's right. You left your own party members to die to get a few gold pieces.
The cleric decided to intervene, saying that we shouldn't be fighting here, that we're all tired and worn out from dealing with the spiders. We finally agree and decide to set up camp for the night before returning to town so we could all put this behind us. Or so we thought. So remember that thing I mentioned earlier about the woods being burned? Well, it turns out those woods were inhabited. Not by spiders, mind you, but by gorillas. Dire gorillas. A troop of angry dire gorillas decided to ambush us with loud whoopings and screechings. We woke up and prepared to fight, but then the whoopings were stopped by the Alpha, who approached us. The Alpha of the troop was able to speak and demanded to know who it was that burned down their home. You know that scene in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, where everyone steps back to single out Harry to volunteer meeting the Hippogriff? That's basically what happened with Rowan, though she didn't try to deny it either. She did, however, complain, saying that we can't sell her out because
We're all supposed to be a team.
oh, now we're a team, are we? We made it clear that this is her Soutery. We continuously told her that what she did was a bad idea and that she shouldn't do it, but she did it anyway. So the troop demanded satisfaction in the form of one-on-one combat. If she surrendered, they'd kill her. If she won, they would let her go. So the group had a gorilla shaman with them. Imagine Rafiki, but jacked. And at the start of the fight, the shaman cast a spell that created a ghost storm around them. Which, one of the flavor effects were if you shouted the name of someone deceased for a minute, aka 10 turns, then they could commune with the dead. Part of Rowan's backstory was that her mother was dead, and she decides,
I'm going to use that spell to commune with my dead mother.
everyone, including Dan at this point, was like, you're in the middle of combat. You have a giant gorilla that wants to make a toothpick out of your spine. Can this not wait? but she insists that she can do both. At this point, we just stopped. We didn't want to argue with her about this anymore. I won't get into the details of the fight beyond that point, as from there it's pretty straightforward. All you gotta know is that she got Donkey Kong slammed into the dirt and the troop was satisfied, leaving us alone. If there was ever a combat equivalent to a walk of shame, we found it. As we just kinda sighed and dragged both Rowan and the monk back to town to bring them to the Temple of Illmatter to see if we could revive them. Turns out resurrecting someone is not cheap. We'd offered to pay them with the loot she tried to make off with, and they begrudgingly agreed. The monk was part of this temple, and they were not exactly happy, but the monk was willing to do it for our sake rather than hers. Also, probably a metagaming guess, as Dan didn't want to spend another 2 hours helping her make another new character. So once she was up, the monk really ended up chewing her out for it, because she had specifically asked not to be left behind should things go bad. Rowan didn't really defend what she was doing. She just shrugged and said,
Well, I hired you, so.
The monk was obviously not happy with this response and said,
Well, consider our contract terminated. I'll be returning my services here to the temple.
And that was the end of that session. Next session we decided, okay, got some new gear, we leveled up, let's try something else. So Rowan decided to use her Detect Evil spell to try and find someone we could bring down. And as it happens, there was one right in town. So to recap, we had a samurai, a fighter, a rogue, a scionist, and a cleric. The monk left the party, and Vinny was getting repaired. I should note at this point I was actively against following anything she did, but somehow ended up getting strung along anyway. So we make it to this weird antique shop, and we see this odd-looking old man. He looked about as confused as we are, but she yelled,
I know what you are. Show yourself.
So the old man sighs and shows his true self. Turns out the man is a lesser devil. To put this in perspective, at this point our party was level 2, maybe level 3 at this point. This thing was level 9. Not spectacularly powerful, but still enough to wipe the floor with any of us, even with optimized equipment. He, and subsequently Dan, was warning us that he could easily crush us. But he's willing to let us go as he has a lot other more important things to tend to. Dan was very consistently urging her to back out, but she insisted, saying,
I'm not afraid of you. Fight me.
So the lesser devil basically sighed and was like,
I bet.
He then proceeded to warp us all into a pocket dimension. This time it was my turn to start glaring daggers at Rowan. Felt nice to be on this side for a change. But that didn't really change the situation. The lesser devil wasn't even giving us his A game. He basically just put us into a timeout pocket dimension. So we started exploring around, and naturally Rowan ends up going on ahead of us. Because why would she stick with the group at this point? Well, it wouldn't be so bad if she didn't forget to check for traps. But since I brought that detail up, you can probably guess what happened next. Dan.
Rowan, make a reflex check.
Rowan.
That one?
Dan.
Oh, no.
Critical fail. Rowan is up in flames, and the 5d6s we could hear Dan rolling were not a good sign. And lo and behold, Rowan is dead. Again! Out of character, she is throwing a full-on tantrum. So as a bit of a compromise, Dan decided to try saying, Well, since it's a distorted dimension, we can have you hang around as a ghost. At this point, we're all like, okay, this is ridiculous, let's just get out of here. Let the demon know that we're not here to fight and let us just talk it out. It sounded like it would work at the time. One thing I forgot to mention is that before the fire trap, we had to cross this unstable bridge. Like, the kind you need to make a reflex save just to cross. We all passed the first time, but this time I wasn't so lucky. This time it was my turn to get the critical fail. Sadly, this is where Minwaro's side of the journey ends. He ended up falling to his death on that bridge. The other three, Duma, Asher, and the cleric, made it back to the entrance and called out the lesser devil. The conversation essentially boiled down to, Bruh, this lady was crazy. We didn't want to do this, she just kind of strung us along. We lost her and one of her friends. Can you just let us out now? Okay, but the way out is kind of rough. So he opens a portal and everyone has to make fortitude saves. Duma and Asher make theirs, but the cleric isn't so lucky and sadly ends up getting spaghettified in transit. And that's where the session ended. At this point, Dan had ended up going to the bathroom, and I think Duma had to do something else in her room, so it was just me, Asher, and Rowan sitting on the couch. Rowan was looking at me very smugly, as if she had just said,
Haha, I got you.
I remember her saying something along the lines of,
That is what you get for not following along.
Dude, I died because I was going along with your dumb idea. Even Asher kind of piped up, saying, yeah, none of us really wanted to jump in. Rowan,
Well, why didn't you say anything?
me, we all did. Most of which while you were doing it. Rowan,
Well, that doesn't excuse how you've been singling me out.
me, excuse me? Only one of our party members has been regularly splitting off and putting themselves and those around them at serious risk for their own benefit. And it wasn't me, or Asher, or Duma. This is the second time you did something that got yourself killed, except this time the samurai got instead of a biker. I think that's what finally did it. She quickly pulled a mechanical pencil off the table and tried to play Evil Dead with my shoulder. She tried to stab me in the shoulder with a mechanical pencil if you've never seen the movie. I managed to catch her arms and they were shaking, and not in the trembling way, but in the straining to overpower me way. Full disclaimer, I have been stabbed before, and to say it sucks is an understatement, but a benefit that comes with it is that you can tell when someone's just playing around versus when someone's actually trying to stab you, and this was not playing. Thankfully, I had a full foot on her and an extra 30 pounds, so I was able to catch her arm, twist the one that had the pencil in it so she'd drop it. I pushed her back and said, Dude, what the f is your problem? She started yelling and cursing incoherently, saying that I twisted her arm, not even acknowledging the attempt to stab me not 5 seconds prior. Then Asher started yelling back at her, until eventually Dan and Duma came back in to break the two up. I found out not long after that Asher and Rowan broke up, and she never came back to game with us again. On the plus side, the rest of the campaign was pretty sweet afterwards. I had a few characters at the ready in case something like this happened, so I wasn't too distraught about losing my samurai, but still, that whole ordeal with Rowan was still ridiculous. Thank you all for supporting this tale, everyone. I hope that the end result was worth the wait. Names were changed to protect the identities of everyone involved, so there should be no complication on that part. And lastly, for those who need to take away anything from this story, don't let Rowan happen to you. End of story. Wow, well, I don't know what I expected since it's literally in the title of the post, but holy crap, dude. It doesn't matter how much you think you're being targeted. There's nothing that could happen in a D&D game that could justify trying to give someone a prison shanking. Now, I'm sure Dan is a good DM for his players, but personally, I don't think I'd have a very fun time in his game. What with all the plethora of save or suck rolls, obsession with alignment, punishing the entire party for the actions of one player, and arbitrary rulings that seemingly target specific players. And I know they're arbitrary because you cannot convince me that Homie took the time to homebrew a custom weather system to determine what direction and speed the wind is blowing at any given time. And it just so happened to be the perfect amount at that specific time to allow a first level spell to burn down an entire jungle. It's as plain as the point on Rowan's pencil that Dan just wanted to throw a roid Rafiki at an annoying player and wanted an excuse to do it. But can you really blame the guy though? If someone's having a bad time in a D&D game, most of the time they would just simply get up and leave to go do something better with their time, not riddle their fellow players with puncture wounds. Yeah, I have some criticisms for the DM's treatment of Rowan, but after Rowan's treatment of everybody, it's really hard to feel bad for her. I'd already be scheming how I could inject steroids into actual baboons just so I could give Rowan a more immersive gaming experience. So yeah, it looks like we got a flawed group filled with flawed people being terrorized by a stab-happy chick who's on a heavy dose of crazy pills. Huh. When you say it out loud, it actually sounds kind of fun. Hey, TLC, I got a new reality show I want to pitch. And on that note, I think that's a good place to wrap up. As always, no Gallery of the Drake this week because of the sponsor and the girth of this saga. I'm not trying to give my editor an aneurysm. Yet. But in the meantime, be sure to send in your fan art to the email in my About section, or upload it to the official Den of the Drake subreddit, linked in the description so I could show it off and give you the shout out you deserve. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.